Welcome back to another new episode of the Get Organised with Decluttr Me podcast with myself, Shalina. I hope you're well wherever you are in the world. Today, we're diving into financial wellness with Beth Clay, a seasoned financial coach who's worked with people across the UAE to improve their relationship with money. Beth has a unique approach, blending practical strategies with insights into our money personalities, understanding why we handle money the way we do and how we make our finances work for us. Hi Beth, welcome to the Get Organised with Decluttr Me podcast. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Thanks, Shalina. It's so lovely to be here with you.
Awesome. So I'm going to get straight into it and ask you the questions so we can find out more about you and about what you do. So what were you doing before you became a financial coach?
So I've got quite an interesting kind of a history really, but for the last 16 years, I've worked in government and corporate communications. So
Wow.
very varied careers, not from your typical financial background,
Yeah.
but I've kind of trained along the way to be a holistic financial coach. But a lot of my journey really stemmed back from working in the UK civil service, as I said, for many government departments. I've worked for many previous prime ministers
Oh,
as
wow.
well. So some interesting ones in there. But yeah, very much working on the communication side. So traveling with previous prime ministers over to China, to France, and opening up new export trade deals. So communicating a lot of the economic policy behind that, which was super interesting. I did a lot of kind of employee engagement as well as part of working government, and then moved over and been in Dubai, working for one of the biggest corporate PR agencies out here and doing a lot of financial PR,
Right.
as well through some big banks and big corporations. So a lot of the kind of work that I have done has had that financial element to it, particularly like working on the economic policy side of things as well, and very much communicating,
Right.
and trying to make as simple as possible, quite hardcore government policy at times. But as I said, my interest really came from, I've always had that strong interest in financial wellness from my late teens and watching my father in my childhood. And we'll probably go into a lot of this. But as I said, I've kind of naturally coached people. And then I found out this was an area that I was super fascinated in, and particularly the psychology of money. And I ended up, as I said, I trained as a financial coach, but also then, as I said, I've been coaching and doing corporate workshops and everything around financial wellness. And I just love it. I've found the remit that's mine to really more. That's good.
That's so amazing. That's really cool. It's lovely when you get you learn about people and their background and stuff. So you must have been with some cool prime ministers then.
Some interesting one.
Okay, I will have to prime later. So when we talked before, and you talked about the idea of 5 minutes to financial wellness, which is like small steps can make a big difference in other areas. So, and like how can starting with just a few minutes a day lead to a better financial health? So can you explain to the listeners, what is the 5 minutes to financial wellness?
Yeah, so that's actually a podcast that I developed on the principle of so many people find finances and their own finances and just everything finance very complicated.
Yeah.
And often a lot of people put it off because there's just so much out there, so much jargon. It feels too stressful a thing to manage.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of us naturally avoid or like money or those conversations or looking at bills and those sort of things. So what I wanted to do is try and, as I said, through the podcast, is break down 5 minutes to really tackle a particular area that may be a challenge for people, and make it, as I say, relatable and accessible so they can then take that away as something to do. So little habits, and as I say, try and address these as much as you can during the week. But even if it's something simple like, I'm going to go back and check my statements today, and I'm going to look at any subscriptions I'm no longer using. So that's one simple habit that you can do, is just go back for the last 3 to 6 months and think, actually, is there one thing, there must be 1 or 2 things here that I'm signed up for that I no longer use and that just come out. And it's those little things, like going for very much the nature of what you do, is kind of like decluttering those, some of our finances and really thinking through in terms of taking that one small habit. And the other thing may be, as I said, when we think about a lot of savings, or if we're struggling to pay those bills, try and think of one habit of automating it.
Yep.
So if
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have an understanding of how much that is, have it as an automation means it's out of mind. So we
Yep.
don't need to stress about that thing. It's coming out and it's there. So it's small little habits like this, and these build up and get us on the path to stronger financial wellness.
But I find with automation, like here, especially in the UAE, with the systems, there was for a while with some of the like DWA and some of the others, you could do automation. And then they changed the system and it's just become a mess. So it's very difficult to automate for a lot of the like utilities or things like that here. It's not like at home there's like direct debit and you could get that
Yeah.
and then it's easy. I mean, I even still now use direct debit for some of the things like my credit card there. So what can people do in that sense because when there isn't an automation system in place with the the third party provider?
Yeah, so I think it's just making sure that, so having a look at your bills and having an understanding of, because like you say, it does fluctuate each month. Sometimes with the bills, they can be, particularly now in the summer months and winter months, that then changes. But actually really like having a look and seeing is like, what are the patterns of how much you're spending? Try and allocate that money aside so that it's put aside in a different account somewhere, or it's just put aside so you know that when that bill comes in, that it's there ready and it can be going. And that's very much, like I say, ring fencing around about roughly what that is that you're going to be spending each month.
Right.
So that, as I said, it just makes it easier. So it's making sure that that's already there. I say a lot of, like you say, a lot of providers do have that, but for those who don't, I think trying to look at those previous patterns and allocating a pot of money roughly of what you think it's going to be and making sure that's put aside so it doesn't come as a surprise. And that's one of the key things to make sure that you know roughly, and I think all of these, you know roughly that bill payment comes in at that certain date each month. So at least you've got that money set aside, ready to kind of get paid.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And you talked about there's certain areas that are challenging for certain people. So what areas are challenging other than like you said about paying the bills? What other things are challenging with regards to money?
So a lot of this comes down to our habits and beliefs and behaviors around money. And a lot of this comes down to kind of like different money personalities. So when we talk about, and I talk there about, for instance, one of the personalities could be somebody who avoids money, and that will come from previous childhood behaviors or anything like previous experiences in their lives where naturally, for whatever reason, they've wanted to, there's been a negative connotation behind it, and they just think it's easier just to avoid that. If it's out of sight, then or out of mind, I don't need to worry about it. But the problem with that is that then becomes a bigger thing, and by the time you look at it, actually your bank statements are huge, and you can't work out all of this money's coming from. So a lot of times, sometimes we put off those things where we think there's going to be a negative surprise in that, and we do hear of a lot of people perhaps like avoiding, the bills come through and they just think, I'll deal with that later. I'll deal with it later. Yeah. And I think that's some of the biggest challenges. Or naturally, some people gravitate to being perhaps like a spender, for instance, and, where they need to have that release in the sense of needing to just spend money to feel better about it, and naturally then going past those limits of what really would be comfortable and kind of achievable within what they're their income and things like that. So I think there's various habits and behaviors, but they link back to, like I say, more deeper issues. Right. And as I said, if you don't address them or acknowledge them and understand them, then it can lead to negative consequence, obviously, later down the line. So it's about, and a lot of the coaching work that I do with, clients and in corporate workshops is really very much addressing some of those behaviors. So if you acknowledge them, you can listen to them and work towards them.
So how do you identify, what money personality people have got? Like, are there specific traits that might reveal how they handle their finances?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, one of the things I often do like an interactive kind of quiz with people. So we kind of go through like different, more kind of how you would approach financial decisions. So for instance, like whether you would, find an investment very risky and you would naturally avoid it, or whether you would, when your money comes in, do you feel like that you have to spend it all? And do you either kind of live for live for the moment, or is it something that you think, actually, do you know what, I'm really, I'm risk averse, I'm saving everything for the future? And there you could have the opposite. You see, you've got people spending, and then you've got people who sometimes kind of what we call like almost hoard money. So they have that fear that money could be taken away any minute because for whatever reason, as I say, in their past or seen other people where they've just lost everything. Therefore, people feel like they need to hold on tight to that money and not spend it in any way. And that can therefore also be disruptive because you're not allowing yourself to live in the moment and live for where we are now. So very much it's about recognizing your behaviors to money. And there are a series of questions and things to really think through of how do I approach and handle certain financial decisions when they come in, and what was my behaviors? And it's when you recognize those. And as I said, money personalities can fluctuate as well. So you could sometimes be different personalities in different moments of your life as well. You're not always naturally going to be a spender. And if you do recognize that you are somebody who's a spender, it's about saying, do you know what, I can still spend and live for today, but I actually need to if I just put in a few of these different habits, I can live for today and live tomorrow. And that's the thing I always try and get people closer to. So whatever natural personality they kind of gravitate towards, they're having that balance. And it's all about balance.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's all about that balance in between, like in that moment, because I can see I now save a lot more than I did when I was younger. I mean, I always had savings, but I remember I saved so much and I put an investment in, I think, what was it, ISA or something when I was in the UK. And then Black Monday happened. So literally everything I'd put in the week before just left. It just went. And it devastated me that I just didn't want to invest for years. I just kept the money, didn't do much with it or spent it because I was like, what's the point? Like, you're going to lose your money as soon as you invest. I think I was very unlucky, unfortunately. But I think, people, it does change, doesn't it? That, you know, because of what incidents happen.
It does. And that's like what you've just talked about there, is that a situation very much will impact. And I see this happen with so many different people that they kind of, sometimes that one moment can therefore have a knock-on effect on how you are and like you handle money like later on in life. And if people see various situations like that, as I said, and that will mean naturally you perhaps might have been a bit more, you know, taking some of those high risks, and then naturally you'll then come back to being quite risk averse. So yeah, like you said, it can change based on those external influences, but it's about kind of thinking, actually, do I want to make a difference? Do I want to change? And do I want to perhaps grow my money? And I'm able to kind of take a little bit of risk. And that's when I kind of talk through those next steps of small steps to kind of like build back your confidence in that area, particularly as you said, those kind of situations like that where it may have knocked in.
Yeah. And I mean, especially because I wasn't trying to be totally high risk, and I still lost everything. So it's like nightmare. But we all have triggers that influence our habits. And I've seen triggers with my clients behind their spending. But what are some of the common triggers behind spending that you encounter, like that can make people more aware of how to manage their finances better?
Yeah. So what we do mainly see, and what I usually see, is people who've stress. So particularly work stress. And we know in the region, like it can be super stressful. A lot of us are juggling very challenging corporate jobs. And so therefore you kind of get to that sense, and it's just that, you know, it's when money comes in, or I just need to go and spend it. I just need to go down the shop and just spend that money and I'm going to feel good. And that's the mentality of kind of, if I just buy that one thing, I'm going to feel better. And therefore that's where a lot of that comes in. And there's sometimes that guilt around, like I said, the stress and the guilt are the main things that I do say people why they feel that natural sense to spend. I think also, as I said, like external influences as well. So where we see, particularly on social media, for instance, if we're having super stressful time or we're going through difficult periods of our time, we see people who look like they have it all. And, you know, if I buy that one thing, I can feel like they look, you know, and it's that sense of, those are some of those kind of triggers. So that may be, like I said, social media could be a trigger in itself, because you're kind of, like I say, seeing or wanting to keep up with the Joneses because what you're seeing out there looks like it's achievable. And surely they've got a perfect life, I can have the same. Or, as I said, some of those more stressful encounters with work, or as I say, or feeling guilty perhaps around what I do hear a lot of as well. And this is one thing to mention, like the guilt part of things is particularly parents often who perhaps spend a lot of time at work or have a lot of things, they feel that guilt and need to spend a lot on the children. And this is actually a common thing that I do see happen, is that because they're away from for whatever reasons, obviously work-wise or work commitments, they feel that sense of guilt. I have to spend more because I haven't had that time with them. And therefore, this is what I hear a lot in what people are telling me as well, in terms of, gosh, I don't know, I didn't realize I was spending so much on the kids, but it's because I feel like that way. And so there's various aspects about how they're feeling in those moments. And the challenging thing, as I said, about when you spend in moments of feeling stress, yes, you have like the endorphins of the moment of buying something, but when you take it home, literally like the next day or even later that evening, that guilt there comes in as well, of that, oh, I've just spent, I knew I didn't have the money to spend it and I did, and now I don't feel great and can't take it back, and those sort of things. And then sometimes you end up feeling worse. So it's about kind of, I always say to people, recognize when you have those triggers and are there other things you can do instead? For instance, like if it is that you recognize on a Thursday night, that's the worst day of the week for you work wise, and all you want to do is go down shopping, actually, is there something that you could do, like just go to a spa class or like a gym class or something that's going to release that tension or that stress and actually make you feel a bit better about yourself, that lasts beyond a couple of hours, those sort of things.
That's a great idea. I think, I would. I mean, I see it a lot with people buying and then they buy and they don't actually take it out of the bag once they get home because of that guilt. So then we eventually have to declutter, and it's like opening presents for me, that I have to open all these bags and boxes of stuff and they forgot they bought it, or they've just chosen to forget because they felt so guilty. So
exactly that. I've seen ahead so many things, exactly the same thing.
It's and then it's sad and it's such a waste of money, and then they're trying to sell it or give it away, and it's just thousands of dirhams that have gone down the drain practically. But doing this, going to a gym or going to the spa would be so much more beneficial. I mean, it costs money still, but at least it will make you feel much better than shopping for something you didn't really need, isn't it? So
yeah, exactly. And actually, sometimes what I tend to send to people as well, if they feel that way and they feel that sense of need to buy something, if it is something you actually want, give it 24 hours or give it 48 hours. And if you still really want that thing, that's fine. If you've got it within your budget and it's mapped out and you've got that fund that I kind of tell people to have aside, that's fine, because you're going to take from that and you shouldn't need to feel that guilt. What I often hear a lot of about as well, people say to me, sometimes I have a rubbish day or a rubbish week and I just go online and buy. But actually, by the time it gets there, like 24 hours, 48 hours later, they don't feel the need that they don't need it anymore because they didn't, when it arrives. And actually they, if they buy it when it's got the return process, then they just say, right, no, I didn't need that at the moment. I don't need that. And they, can get it picked up and sent back. Now, that's not always the best way, but sometimes that's helpful because, they feel that need to buy in that moment. And actually, as long as there's a return thing, they can take it back if they know they are somebody who would do that,
Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't do that, like do the return.
Exactly.
Even Amazon. And I say to people, you can literally click on a few buttons immediately and then leave it outside your door and they'll come and pick it up. You don't even have to keep it with you. Just leave it outside and they'll come pick it up within 24 hours. But people don't understand that. So it is a thing as well. That's another issue, it's another step that people find difficult to do, don't they?
Exactly.
We're talking about people. Let's talk about couples. I often find they have different approaches to money. And so how can differing money personalities affect the relationship? And what advice do you give them to help them approach the finances together?
Yeah, you're totally right. This is such an interesting area. And I've been doing quite a bit of like couples therapy actually around this area, because we do find that financial stress is one of the biggest causes of marriage breakdowns ahead of affairs and things like that. It's huge and it's bigger than we think about. And that comes down a lot to the fact that money isn't really spoken about, particularly before relationships come together. And therefore, it's one of those things that's put to the bottom of the pile, and actually it's so important to address it at the beginning. Now don't want to be like, what's your salary? What's this? What's that? Right in the moment, first start out, but actually making sure that you guys can come together or understand each other's personality. And it comes back to that money personality piece that I talk about, is that I hear from so many people how they absolutely adore their other halves, but they're completely different money personalities. And this comes back to, as I said, where they were in their childhoods, how money was discussed in the home, how money was approached, and where they've been along their journey until they've met that couple in that life. So many times in a lot of relationships, you'll have one person who's a natural spender and spends money because of those different traits that we talked about, and someone who naturally is a saver because, they've seen their parents, go for really rough times and they need to naturally feel that they have to save the money. So that is really tricky when you are having obviously two incomes coming in, or even just one income, how the different tendencies to spend money happen in the relationship. And it's super challenging because particularly when money isn't addressed or talked about. And a lot of times, for instance, one person may decide not to reveal about any of the finances, and that can cause huge tensions about, I don't even know. I hear so many times, I don't even know how much money we've got in our savings. I don't know how much money we've got here. I've no idea. I don't know how much even what my husband earns or my wife earns. There's a lot of those things because money is because for such a long time, and certainly in different cultures as well, it's been seen as a taboo topic and not one to discuss.
Yeah.
The most important thing is having those open conversations. So when you are coming together in relationships, being open, and that's the most important thing, being open about money and coming together to kind of try and see it as a dual effort together. And naturally, as I said, if you see that there's tendencies in one of the people to particularly spend money, to maybe, as I say, work through a budget that works together, that allows that fund, which I talk about, and both sides can have those funds together to spend on those things. So they're not judging the other half for what they spend the money on, or those two different things. That actually, because that's when we see those things that are helpful, when both couples have, ideally, or both people in the relationship have a separate account that's theirs, that they can have that pot of money, and that then the other half isn't blaming them for what they're doing, because blame is one of the biggest things that's super challenging to address. But they have a joint account and they have those joint goals together as well. Yeah. So making sure that when they come into a relationship saying, okay, we both want to buy a car, or we both want to get married and this is how much the money is cost, and we both want to buy a house, and how do we come together based on what both side is earning, what works best for our situation. Now, as I said, it is about being open, and as open as you can be. I am a big fan as well. I encourage a lot of couples to go and have money dates. So not as
a money day.
They don't sound super sexy, but
I know, what is it? I've never heard that. Tell me, what is a money date?
The money date is basically once a month, if you can, just go and sit outside of the home, so somewhere neutral, if it's down a cafe somewhere or a morning, and just spend a bit of time over a coffee, just going through, like, reviewing your goals, your financial goals. Is there something that's come up that's been unexpected that you haven't thought about or you haven't considered? And how do you approach that together?
Right.
So you're sat there in neutral terms together in a place that's not in the home where there's the stress of everything else around you, but it's in a neutral place. You're going and having those open conversations about, okay, we didn't expect this. That's fine. Let's change the budget a little bit more. We can change, increase savings in this pot and this pot. How do we do it together?
Right.
And it's using opportunities. So one of you may be thinking about, or overly concerned about a particular issue that may be coming up, or I don't know, let's say Christmas, and there's like all the costs that come with that.
Yeah.
How do you address it? Like, I'm a little bit concerned about Christmas. Can we just talk about how we can maybe put some money aside over the next few months to get to that part? And it's coming at it from that approach. So you see it as a combined effort, not one-sided.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing, because when you're in that neutral zone and both of you are seeing it as a challenge or a topic to address together, it makes it so much easier.
That sounds really good. Yeah. That sounds sensible. Like, I've never heard of it, but it's a very sensible way of dealing with money issues. But what do you do with people who have, I see so often, like on Facebook groups, with, the husband doesn't tell what's happening. They have a joint account, because is it allowed now that women can have separate account, like wives can have separate accounts? Because before it wasn't possible. here?
It is possible now. Yeah, they can go and get separate accounts now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was a big issue for many years. So women were like, the stay-at-home wives were not having access to money except what they could use. And then, there was a lot of that. So that's good to know as well. But what about when, the husband doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to say how much they earn?
I mean, that is challenging. And I think that's something that they have to have those open conversations. It has to be seen from both sides that they have to take it seriously, because this is a huge part. And it all comes down to trust, having that trust in the relationship, and money is about having trust.
Yeah.
People need to see it in the same degree of, how you trust each other, that you're not going to go off and meet other people. Money should be seen within all of that. It's a huge trust issue. And if the other half wants to understand, and the other thing to say is, and as I go back to my situation as well, when, sadly my father passed away really suddenly, back in my late, thank you, but back in my late teens, and he's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now,
right?
Because he was so amazing with money. He was so financially savvy, and he was incredible and inspired me to do that. But obviously when he passed, and he was amazing, but he was, naturally tended to fit that role of looking after the finances. But then obviously when he passed, my mum then had to learn all about the money, and he had obviously laid out everything, and everything was all set because he'd been so good with it. But what I'd say to people in those couples, and when you're having that, struggling to have those conversations with your other halves, is what happens if you were gone tomorrow and I was left with all the money? Like, you have to know that. You just have to. It's not a thing of like, oh, I'll just let you know when the time comes. No, the time is now, because you don't know what's coming up.
No.
So I always say that is in terms of approaching it through that. Please help me understand in a non-judgmental way how much we have in our savings, how much we have, because this is a combined thing. We are in this together. And it's about encouraging those open conversations. As I say, in a neutral place, I want to understand this for my own understanding, and in case anything happens. And as I say, building that trust together. And so that we can think about, okay, great. I didn't realize we had that in savings. Could we think about this situation that we want, saving for this goal or this goal? Where it makes it easier. But it does take time. And obviously, as I said, in those situations as well, where you do hear of one person in the relationship holding on and not telling the other, as I said, there are deeper issues behind that. So deeper issues as to why they are not revealing it. And that's where sometimes you have to go a lot deeper into why are they holding back, and why can't they give that? So there's a bit of work, and it does mean they have to be open to changing, and kind of coming around to that situation.
That sounds good. That's very true. I can see that. You've talked about before about 50-30-20 model, which sounds like a really great structure for budgeting. Can you explain how it works so it can help the listeners to manage their finances?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a model that I use, and a lot of financial experts all around the world recommend this model. And it's something where people say, I just don't understand how much I should be saving. I feel like I'm just spending everything, and how does it all work, and how can I put aside stuff? So I actually have developed a budget tracker I can send to you as well.
Okay,
to send out to people. Yeah, no, it's a free tool, but it does help and visualize it, and you categorize money. But so the idea is that 50% goes on needs. So those needs are your rent, your bills, your food, school fees, things that you cannot live without. That is your needs. Then 30% is your wants. So, the eating out, going out for lunch with friends, the cinema, entertainment, clothes, lifestyle, beauty, gym, those sort of things that are our wants. And then 20%, which is savings. So ideally, a lot of us come to this region in particular, kind of want to save a lot more than 20%. When I say 20%, people are like, well, I want to be saving almost 50% of my salary. But
doesn't happen.
It is hard. And I say, listen, because, in this situation, start with this model. And if you can, and you're finding that you're getting, your salary is increasing, you're getting new bonuses, focus on that 20% pot, building that up more. Do you know? Because often we see a lot of lifestyle creep when people get that, those higher incomes, and then it kind of spend on those other sides, but not on the bit that actually that'll help get you closer to kind of that financial freedom goal or whatever. But that model works quite well, because enables people to see what realistically, how much they could actually should be spending in that needs box. And for instance, if they're realizing they're about to take out a really big rental, rental property, and that's ended up being 60% of their, or whatever of the general income, that's probably not advisable. So it's more about thinking, actually, what is advisable? Okay, so I need to everything needs to be within that 50% pot to make it manageable. And I do say to people, because a lot of people, as I say, think of budgets and they restrict themselves often. I'll limit that one side. I'll just limit that one side. But actually, it is so important still to have what I want. So I also call it the fun fund. But having that aside, because when you are budgeting and working towards your goals, you need to have some element of fun or something that brings you joy. Because like with diets, if it's so restrictive, you're not going to keep at it longer.
Very true. Yeah. That's so true.
So if you allow yourself to have that and have that flexibility and to enjoy those moments in life, you will. There are studies out there that show you get to your goals a lot quicker and faster, and it helps you stay on track by doing that. So as I say, that's the kind of model that I use. As I've got a tracker as well, I can send you, but it does break it down into different categories that you can kind of find out all the different areas, and it kind of shows it visually as well. So you can almost see it in a pie chart. So it helps sometimes help you get to that, visualize how you can get there.
Oh no, that's amazing. But what happens when you do this, you create this model, but how can you maintain it to avoid slipping back into the old habits? You want to, because they're kind of boundaries, aren't they? 50, 30, 20. So how can people not slip or try not to slip?
So it's about keeping on top of it. So rather than saying, okay, I'm going to just do this month one and okay, that's what that looks like and I won't look at it again for another 6 months. It's things like with a habit, like with a diet or anything else, you need to keep on top of it.
Yep.
So you need to keep assessing each month, what are the new things? Because things do come along. Things do come along that knock us off and we're just suddenly like, oh gosh, suddenly you haven't, you're realizing that the savings is going down or these different areas. So it's about coming and continually reviewing the model each month and kind of making adjustments, going back to those things of, perhaps, like I said at the beginning, what are those subscriptions that we haven't been using for a long time? Can we take those out so that we're not sacrificing on the one side or, on our savings? But what are the areas where we can, those things that don't bring us joy or, don't make us happy, where can we cut those things out so that we're not sacrificing? As I said, it does come back to that. I also advocate as part of that 20% pot as we're building up. If we don't already have it, build up an emergency fund.
Right.
And that emergency fund is a small pot of money that you can draw upon if the car breaks down or air conditioning goes or those things that happen and none of us can predict them. They just happen and they just catch us off guard. And so that money set aside in a little pot that we can draw easy access that you can get to whenever you need helps relieve a lot of that financial stress because you're not thinking, all right, I had that money, that's fine, I had it there and I don't need to eat into all this savings that I've got for whatever thing I'm saving for, So I do advocate for saying that, but it is something that you need to just keep at it all the time and, reviewing it and making sure that it still remains the same. So using that tracker, as I said, check in once a month. Is things changed? Have our our groceries gone up or has this gone up? Those sort of things that you can continue to see and assess.
Yeah, that's not awesome. So finally, let's talk about, is there one key takeaway for financial wellness that you can give to the listeners to inspire them and to help them to start moving forward?
I think it's about starting small. So look at some of the daily habits that you can make and go back to that part of being open to change. So what small things can you put in place? So even if that's, for instance, listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
So, this podcast today, we've got lots of different podcasts that you can just listen to. One thing, 5 minutes of making small changes to your life. So if it's, I want to understand how to invest. Okay, I'm going to listen to this podcast or whatever. Those little things each day, 5 minutes of just listening to that and making those different changes. And just looking at all the different ways in your life in terms of where are you struggling right now? What are the things that are bringing you financial stress? and where can you make a change in terms of bringing back some of that joy into your life and feeling more in control? Because a key part of financial wellness is being in control of your finances. Because once you're in control, then you feel happy about everything else in your life. So what small habits can you put in place to feel that control and bring that back? So even if at the end of this podcast, you're working away saying, okay, I'm going to look at automating this, this, and this, because I realize that I put this to the back of my head and I ignore those things. But if I do that, I've got that in control. So it's just putting aside little habits. And as I said, sometimes that is upskilling yourself around money. If you haven't thought about it for a long time, you don't feel that you know enough, look at those different resources that you can take and try and just equip yourself every single day to get on that journey.
I think that's a brilliant idea. And I think, talking to you about I put money in investments and it didn't work out. Now I'm like, maybe I should look into it again, look into getting shares and stocks and stuff like that and seeing how it works. But I've always been worried about doing that since like 20 odd years ago this happened, and I'm still damaged. So yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. Thank you so much for being on the show. How can people find out more about what you do and get in touch with you?
Yeah, no, it's been amazing to be with you today. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you want to get in touch, I'm Finance Her Well on Instagram, and I've got the website as well. Reach out. I do one-on-one coaching, couples therapy coaching as well. And I also do a lot of corporate workshops. I've got a membership coming out in the new year as well.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
So just make it, a lot of people have asked for accessible and relatable financial insight and to be held to account. So a lot of people want that. And so I'm kind of working on a membership that will help people get closer to that financial journey. And also we've got the podcast 5 Minutes to Finance Well, which is available on Apple and Spotify.
Awesome. So I'm going to put everything in the show notes as well so people can find out more about you. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. And it's just been so insightful. So thank you so much, Beth.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. It's been great.
It was so wonderful to have Beth on the show today. I hope you found her tips and tricks really helpful and have spurred you on to sort out your finances. I will leave all her details in the show notes and also the budget tracker as well. Thanks so much for watching and listening. If you loved what you heard, please share it with your friends and family and anyone you think could find this episode useful. Thanks again for listening, and I'll speak to you next week. Take care. Bye.